Hey all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Mel, and as you can probably tell, I bought some books this weekend. So, you know how buying books and reading books are two completely separate hobbies, and sometimes you just get the itch to buy a book? I got that itch and bought way too many things. Like, somebody take my wallet away, way too many things. So I actually got books from 3 different places. The first was I shopped on Amazon and bought a few indie books that I could not get locally. And then I went to Barnes & Noble with the boyfriend over the weekend, which you would have probably already seen footage of. We had a great time. He went and looked in the true crime section to see what he could find to buy on tape, which I told him made him sound very, very old. And then I actually bought a few things on tape at the massive Audible sale that you guys have probably already heard about, where there were so many titles under $5, under $4 that I just kind of went buck wild. So I'm going to start with the indie books and we'll knock those out first. And I will have everything timestamped down below in case you're only interested in a certain haul. But the first indie book that I bought is one that I have had on my radar for a very long time. It's one that Cassidy from Covers with Cassidy has mentioned quite a few times to me, and that is Of Blood and Fire by Ryan Cahill. This book, I'm not 100% sure what it's about. I do know that it is set in a high fantasy world and there are dragons. One of the things that sold me on the back was that 3 strangers are going to arrive in the village of Milltown, and they have a secret that they would kill to keep. And it also says there is no prophecy, his coming was not foretold, he bleeds like any man, and bleed he will. Which is not something normally you hear, prophecies and he won't bleed, or others will bleed. But this seems like an interesting take. Again, the other covers actually have dragons on them, so I'm hoping that there is a heavy dragon presence in this, but I will probably be buddy reading this one with Cassidy sometime this month, so there is yet another book to add to the TBR. The next one is one that I have seen around everywhere recently. So many people are talking about it, and therefore I just had to get it. I had to know what all the hype was about, and that is Illborn by Daniel T. Jackson. From what I know about this story is there are 4 men and women who are dreaming of this gate and now all of a sudden have supernatural powers, and they have to kind of navigate why they got these powers, where they came from, and what they're going to do with them. The back actually says, as they experience conflict, love, lust, and betrayal in lands which are being overtaken by war, they must try to stay ahead of and to trust the sinister forces which are now pursuing them, for they are being hunted. It sounds so good. I have heard nothing but good things about this book, so I am very excited to find out what all the hype was about. The next one is one that I've actually had my eye on for a while. I think it won an award a couple of years ago, and that is Paladin Unbound by Jeffrey Spite. This, from what I understand, is following an unlikely hero with orc blood. I think he's half human, half orc. And he has to dive down into the depths of this world to help find some missing people and confront the evils of the world. It does sound standard, but it also sounds really good. It mentions that he was compelled to save a kingdom that he loves, but can he defeat an enemy while protecting his true identity, or must he risk everything? Which is very intriguing, considering at the beginning it talks about how he's the hero that nobody wanted. This book is actually very, very short and the print is quite big, so I think I can knock this one out pretty quick. I'm hoping maybe to read it this month, but we'll just have to wait and see. Okay, so now moving on to the books that I got physically from Barnes & Noble. I bought more than I intended. I went going for 2 books. Didn't buy either of those books, and instead bought 5 more. So the first one that I want to talk about is one that I have seen around before, but I have not seen anybody talk about it lately. And that is Blood of Zeus by Meredith Wild and Angel Payne. This one is a urban fantasy romance, I believe, set in Los Angeles with a demon and a godlike professor. And it just says an ancient grudge of forbidden love. I've heard really good things about this book. I have a feeling it's going to be pretty smutty. I like me some dark academia mixed with some demons, so I'm excited about this one. Next up is one that I've actually seen. I haven't seen around as much, but it's one I've had on my wish list for a while. So when I saw it sitting at Barnes & Noble, I was like, why don't I just go ahead and get that? and that's Black Tongue Thief by Christopher Buehlman. From what I know about this book is it follows two main characters, one that is a pickpocket and the other that is a gallant knight, and they end up crossing paths and intertwining their destinies and have to go on an epic journey where goblins hunger for human flesh, krakens hunt dark waters, and honor is a luxury few can afford. I hope that this has a lot of humor in it. It sounds like it would when you put together a grumpy, honor-filled knight with a pickpocket. I, again, don't know a ton about this book. It has been blurbed by some people that I really like, or at least I think I will like Brent Weeks and Anthony Ryan. It was also blurbed by Django Wexler, and spoiler alert for the next book that I bought at Barnes & Noble. It is Ashes to the Sun by Django Wexler. This author was recommended to me by Rachel from Argent Raby, and she just said that she loves everything that this author has written. It usually follows sibling relationships. I think that oftentimes it is sapphic, if I'm not mistaken. This particular one, I'll just read you the little blurb because it sums it up better than me and it's not very long. It just says, "Not even the ties of blood will keep them from splitting the world in two. Surrounded by the relics of a dead empire, two siblings, one who wields magic for the empire and the other who has vowed to bring it all down, will battle for the fate of the world in the first book of this epic new fantasy trilogy." Sounds really good. I love this cover. I mean, look at that hand. It speaks to me, so I had to pick it up. And the last two that I bought are a lot more on the horror/sci-fi end. The first of which just came out recently, called Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes. From what I understand, this is a horror sci-fi about a ghost ship and the unspeakable horrors that they find when they go to investigate this ghost ship. I am sold. You mentioned sci-fi, you mentioned space, you mentioned ghosts, you mentioned horrors. I'm here for it. So again, hoping to get to read this one really soon. It sounds like something I would love. And the last book that I got from Barnes & Noble was actually one of my most anticipated releases of the year, and that is Sundial by Catriona Ward. This is the author of The Last House on Needless Street, and while that book did take me a couple of chapters to get into, it ended up being one of my favorite books of last year. It sucked me in. I found the ending a very clever twist on a very overdone trope. And so when I heard about this one, I just knew that I had to have it. It actually came out on March 1st, so last week by the time you guys are seeing this. I've heard it is really weird, and it follows a mother who is concerned about her daughter as she thinks she is displaying things that are very unnatural and remind her a lot of her past. So she decides to go back to her hometown of Sundial, only to find out that maybe her daughter isn't the one that was acting strangely. I just know that Catriona Ward in Needless Street did a really good job of twisting a overdone trope on its head. So while this may sound like a very domesticated, typical thriller, I'm hopeful that she'll do something different with it. I think this one leans more toward the weird horror, so I'm super excited to get to this one. Plus, just look at that cover. Like, that cover is fantastic. Can you see that? It's fantastic. All right, so now let's talk about the too many books that I bought on the Audible sale. Audible did a up to 85% off sale last week, and I actually stumbled upon it before they announced it by complete and total accident, and thought that they had actually made a glitch in their system and that this was not supposed to be happening because it was literally that good. I bought a few things, and then somebody else would mention something, and so I would buy a couple more things, and then before I knew it, I had a list that I haven't even tallied yet because I'm scared. So a lot of these books that I bought, I tried to buy indie books that I could not get the audiobook from, like my library or Libby or Scribd or anything like that. The first one is Never Die by Rob Hayes. I've heard a lot about this series and mostly good things. From what I understand, there is a boy that has to deliver a sentence from God, but the God is death, and he was actually murdered before having to enact this sentence, which sounds very cool and very twisted, and I'm intrigued to see how that's all going to play out. Again, I've heard great things about this series. I can't remember exactly how many books it is, but I know that it's at least 3. I think. So the next one was a complete and total accident impulse buy, and I fully blame Rachel for this one because we were sprinting and she gets in the comments of the sprints and's like, hey, this is a teddy bear horror, ha ha ha. But it actually sounds kind of good. So the next one that I got was Stuff and Nonsense by Andrew Seipel, and this is part of a series as well. It was nominated for the 2019 Obie Awards, and I'll just have to read you the synopsis because I can't make this crap up. It says, meet Threadbare. He's 12 inches tall, full of fluff, and really, really bad at being a hero. Magically animated and discarded by his maker as a failed experiment, he is saved by a little girl, but she's got problems of her own and he may not be able to help her. Fortunately for the little golem, he is quick to find allies, learn skills, gain levels, and survive horrible predicaments, which is good because his creator has a whole lot of enemies. Sounds really good. I don't know how I feel about golem teddy bears, but we're gonna find out. We are going to find out. All right, so I'm gonna actually put a little tracker down here and we'll find out together how many Audible books I bought because I'm scared to count, to be honest. The next one is, again, another Rachel pick. I'm blaming her for this sale completely. And that is one of her favorite series, Unsold by Will White. And there's really not a whole lot to go on as far as this description is concerned. From my understanding, souls have 1,000 different paths to power, but we're following a unsouled individual who is learning his clan's secrets and forging his own path to power. Again, I don't know a whole lot about this story, but I have heard great things from several people, including Rachel, so while it was on super sale, I just figured I might as well go ahead and buy it. The next one is Flock by Kate Stewart. This is a taboo romance that I've heard some great things about, and the cover is just beautiful. I think this is a reverse harem romance where the main character has made up this image in her head about what romance is supposed to be like, and so when she meets these men, she is willing to do anything to have that romance, including keeping their dark secrets. I haven't read a lot of romance in the last couple of years. I've gravitated more toward fantasy, but I've heard such good things about this series and this author that I really did want to give it a try. Next is one that was a publisher's pack, so I actually got both in the duology for the price of one, which was fantastic, and that is Mage Errant by John Bierce. This is a school setting, which I absolutely loved, and it follows a guy that's not very good at magic. He blows things up and things just don't go his way until he becomes the unlikely apprentice of an unusual mage. Things are going great, but then his final test for his first years is to be sent down to the terrifying labyrinth of Skyhold. Labyrinths, mages, school setting, I am sold. Next up is one that I know everybody has probably heard about by now, but as it's just available on Audible and I do want to be able to listen to the audiobook, I decided to go ahead and pick it up. And that is the Zodiac Academy Volume 1 by Caroline Peckham and Susan Veltelli. This is a bully romance in another school setting, I think set in like a world where your astrological zodiac signs are the basis for the magic system. And I think it's involving fae. I've heard decent things about this first one, but I've also heard that each in the series just gets more addictive and more addictive and more addictive. So I'm just mostly curious to find out what everyone is talking about. I need to be in the know here. The next one is another fantasy romance, and that is Savage Lands by Stacey Marie Brown. I believe this one is a fae romance set 20 or 30 years after there was a battle for world domination, essentially, and this orphan is sent to the worst prison that you could possibly be sent to, and she doesn't know how she's going to survive. But of course, she meets a sexy fae, and the only way that she can escape with her life is to win the games. It sounds great. The cover just drew me in instantly, so I think the last book in the series may be coming out later this year, so I really do want to catch up on all of these. And so I bought it. I bought it. Y'all are gonna have to excuse some of these descriptions because I'm trying not to read off of the back of every single one of these, but I'm really bad about somebody saying, ooh, this book was really good, and I'm like, okay, I trust you, wish list, without actually knowing what it's about. I'm not a big synopsis reader. I don't love to know a lot about books before I head into them, so bear with me if something remotely sounds like anything that you would like. I will try to remember to link all of the books down below so that you can just kind of click to their page and find out more. Okay, so the next two, I'm not going to give a long description about because they are books 2 and 3 in a trilogy, and that is the second and third book in the Likeness trilogy by James Islington. The first book is The Shadow of What Was Lost, and this is set 20 years after a war where these peoples who were thought to be almost gods were overthrown. And from what I can tell, the people in this world can have something called the gift, and our main character, Davian, is a student of the gifted and is kind of having to navigate some of the consequences of this world, but the old gods are stirring, and there's also another character that's stirring in the west that's going to be very closely connected to Davian's own fate. I've heard that this book is very reminiscent of Wheel of Time and a lot of Brandon Sanderson's novels, and while I didn't love the first 2 books in the Wheel of Time series, I do like that style of fantasy, that large, expansive world fantasy. And of course, as you can see, I absolutely love Brandon Sanderson, so I'm very excited to give this series a try. It also has one of my favorite narrators, Michael Kramer, who does all of the Brandon Sanderson books, so can't go wrong there. Next up is one that I actually needed for this month anyway, and that is Call of the Bone Ships, which is the second book in the Tide Child series by R.J. Barker. The first book follows Joran and Mies. Joran is a reluctant captain of a black ship, and Mies has decided that she needs this ship for her own purposes. It's set in a world where the bones of dragons are used to make these ships, and the ships are needed to fight the war. And there is one last dragon that has been spotted, and whoever manages to kill it first wins the war. I enjoyed the first book well enough. I do think that it had some pacing issues, and I wish that there was a lot more plot. But the ending has me excited for book 2, and I enjoyed the audiobook, so I definitely wanted to have the audio for the second book in the series. The next is one that I almost can't not have an audiobook for because this book is a beast, and that is Dragon Mage by M.L. Spencer. This audiobook is actually 27 hours long, so it is a beast of a book. But one I've heard great things about. I think it has some autism rep in it, and I know that she's currently writing the sequel. And the tagline for this is just, Aaron Wraith has the power to change the gods. He just doesn't know it yet. So basically, from what I can understand, he has a gift that doesn't even know about, and this gift is very, very powerful and can overthrow the gods. He's having to fight for respect to become the next dragon rider. So I'm thinking dragons are going to play a very big role in this book, and as you can already tell, I love me some dragons, so I'm very, very excited to get to this one. Alright, so we're down to our last 2. The next one is, again, one that was Audible only that I really needed for this month's TBR anyway, and that is Children of Time by Adrian Chachowski. This book I've heard is actually on the dense side. It is a first world contact with what I've heard are giant spiders, so I'm interested to see how that plays out. Since it has been described to me as relatively dense, I did definitely want an audiobook so that I could read and follow along and hopefully absorb the story a lot more. And the last one is a Jade Made Me Do It, and that is Black Hawks by David Ragg. Watching her read this on sprints, she was laughing out loud. She was calling it a 5-star read before she ever even finished it, and that had me very intrigued. She was even reading passages from this book, and I was laughing out loud at some of the things that these characters were saying. My understanding of this is that we have a character named Chell who is bound by oath and can't go home, but if he agrees to escort a prince to the other side of the world, his oath will be broken. And in order to guard a prince against assassins and thieves, you need a band of assassins and thieves. It sounds very good. It reminds me a lot of Kings of the Wild, I think, where we have an old group of mercenaries that decide to get the band back together. I think it's going to have a very similar humor to that book, and while I haven't read it yet, I've heard fantastic things about it, so I was very excited to see this one on the Audible sale for super cheap because that was one of the ones I had planned to buy at Barnes & Noble and they did not have. We're done. That's it. Those are all of the books that I bought last weekend. Don't judge me. I'm judging myself. I don't need your judgment. Don't judge me. But Editing Mel will put in the corner right here the number of Audible books that I bought as well as the number of books in general that I bought this weekend. I'm terrified to find out. I don't want to know. I'm putting my wallet in time out. But With that being said, that is everything. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and leave me a book emoji down below. Also, tell me what the last book you purchased was, and if you're excited to read it, or if I should read it. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!